Hello, my name's Carlo. That's Jack,
Hello.
Michael,
Hello.
and Joseph
Hello.
from Mr. Cooper's 7th period A-Push. We will mostly be covering specific examples in American history where economic and demographic changes affect the environment and later create disagreements and conflicts. We will start this at period 1 with Michael Moss.
I think a good starting place would be to talk about the true power that the environment had early on. So, in the beginning, America was home to many different civilizations that adapted to the environment in different ways. So, the spread of maize, squash, and bean cultivation.
Wait, Michael, what is maize?
It is corn, Carla. It's corn.
What a
Does that answer your
revelation.
question? Yeah. Okay. So basically, these crops, they didn't exhaust the soil when they were being rotated in a specific way. So many early societies, like the Anasazi, depended on these crops and settled where these could be populated. Taking the Anasazi, they lived around Arizona and went out for like cliff pueblos, stuff like that. And they depended especially on corn, as it could be pretty easily cultivated there. So maybe conversely, we could say that the environment actually affected the demographic changes, which is an interesting side to take.
Yeah, it definitely makes sense because like a lot of different tribes, they had to adapt to their environment by whatever food was available to them at that time.
Yeah, and there were a lot of them all across the continent, so a lot of different things had to take place.
Okay, what else do you have, Michael?
Do you want me to go to my next bullet point?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you ready?
Yeah.
Okay. So jumping forward a little bit, we can talk about the Columbian Exchange. So colonizing the New World had a few benefits associated with it in the eyes of kings and queens. Most importantly was their drive for wealth. There was an idea that the New World would be chock full of gold and metals that could help propel societies forwards in terms of money. Fortunately, there was a lot of money to be made, as we know, but not necessarily in regards to gold. So these demographic changes of people coming over to the Americas and the New World actually resulted in a lot of changes to the environment over here. So like corn, potatoes, and tomatoes were going to Europe after being cultivated here. Unfortunately, as we know now, there were many downsides to the Columbian Exchange, like disease, but that's for another time. So the environment was under a pretty large amount of stress during this time, as products from the New World were going to the Old World and vice versa. It's kind of interesting to look at how they were able to do so much trade back and forth with kind of primitive technology as well. So I don't think many people cared about this, like the environmental impact, because there was so much land.
Yeah, it doesn't happen until later.
Yeah, like I feel like that's later on because people were mainly focused on money now, and since there was so much land, like I said, nobody cared. So like the second half of the question, there weren't really many debates going on around this time. Like maybe a couple, but I doubt it.
People probably didn't realize what they were doing to the environment at the time as well, as probably my guess.
Yeah, and I don't think it was like large scale enough that it really impacted anything that much as compared to later on. But this process was like known as mercantilism, and as economic demand grew, the use of the environment grew. So like the New World environment was different from the European environment, and because certain cash crops like tobacco from Virginia were very popular and exported all over the world. So yeah, one other large system that had an effect on the environment was the headright system. So the headright system granted acres for settling new lands, and the system gave a lot of economic opportunity to new settlers, and they tried to get as much out of the environment as they could. So really, they're kind of putting like a chokehold on the environment as they're taking like 50 acres of land and settling it and doing whatever they want with it. So unlike the previous rotation of the maize, beans, and squash, the system really exhausted the soil and made it harder to grow and produce crops as more crops were grown, and over the years it just kind of broke down a little bit.
Yeah, but later on they moved away from mercantilism into a more secluded, kind of contained system for growing crops. They didn't really have outside interaction with other countries. It was mostly localized in farms in the south, which they grew the same kind of crops they grew back then, like corn, tobacco.
Maize.
Like those. Yeah.
Maize or corn. Yeah, I mean it's kind of hard to trace the question back here, but you still can see it, just not as clear as you can in other time periods.
It's not as
Um,
important, I guess.
Yeah, because it wasn't as important and it was more primitive around this time, so people didn't really care as much.
Yeah,
Exactly.
understandable. Next we'll go on with Jack, who reviewed chapter 4 through 6 on Environmentalist.
So, beginning of this chapter, we had the buffalo, basically the mass murder of all the buffalo throughout Northern America, which the Native Americans used for food, but the Americans would kill the buffalo. And essentially, I have a question for everyone here. Why do you guys think the United States killed all the buffalo? What do you think their motivation for that was?
They probably produced a lot of food, I guess.
Yeah, it was definitely economic, like trying to get the most money that they could, because I'm pretty sure that the buffalo were used for a lot of things.
But also, it was just about the game. Also,
Yeah.
like people would just frame the buffalo heads as sort of a
That's true.
trophy.
Yeah,
Yeah,
weren't
yeah.
like buffalo horns, I guess, just like also pretty valuable as well.
Yeah, they'd probably be sold like in just different markets and stuff.
Yeah.
And then the second major portion of this time period was the environmentalist movement, which was started through the transcendentalist movement, and it was composed of a lot of different people, but the main two that come to mind are Ralph Waldo Emerson, Henry David Thoreau. And their work articulated America's coming of age. Additionally, another artist was Thomas Cole, who made the painting of the oxbow at the Hudson River School. What do you guys think of this?
It definitely shows a lot of little details of like in the environment. You could see like a contrast between like the dark on the left with like
Right, I
the
was
bright
gonna
and light on the right.
Yeah,
I
I
don't
think
really
his
know what
goal
it means
here.
though.
I think his goal here is just trying to show that the environment is like a natural beauty that shouldn't be messed with. Probably is my guess.
Uh,
Yeah,
To
there's
spread
two
awareness.
sides to nature. There's a peaceful side and one that's chaotic.
Yeah, actually, that's good. Actually, yeah, that makes sense. But anyways, back to Ralph Waldo Emerson, Henry David Thoreau. They were very influential, and they basically they wrote texts that tried to describe the beauty of nature, and a lot of their texts were also very similar with Jonathan Edwards' view. Emerson believed that the God is one and all, and so does Jonathan Edwards. Additionally, they also inspired people such as Frederick Law Olmsted and John Muir to continue pursuing the environmental movement.
John Muir, yes.
And then finally, the Hudson River School, which was basically just a group of environmentalist painters that wanted to showcase the beauty of the environment by painting. And some other questions that would be good to think about was, what was the influence of the transcendentalist movement in the future, such as maybe even Rachel Carson's future environmentalist movements, and also how badly did the United States alter their environment during this time period?
Like America did kill like a bunch of buffalo, so I guess they altered like their environment quite a bit. Plus, like the railroads that stretched across the continent.
Yeah, even just like the westward movement was, altered it a lot.
Yeah.
Right.
And the other question, Jack?
How badly did the United States alter their environment during this time? So yeah, you're on track there with like the railroads but any other?
No. What was the other question?
What was the influence of transcendentalists on other environmental movements?
Right. Okay. So the transcendental movement influenced the environmental movement, which was started by Rachel Carson, through its ideals that man has corrupted nature and kind of bent it to its own will. So this comes from the use of pesticides to prevent creatures like just destroying the plants and crops. And this would cause runoffs that would harm fish in the rivers and cause like just air pollution as well. There was also concern for the hydrogen bomb testing on Bikini Atoll, which would cause air radiation around it and would make the area pretty much inhabitable to any creature or human. So the environmental movement raised awareness for a lot of the altercations that the humans have been doing to the to the environment. So to convey her message, she wrote a book in 1962 called Silent Spring, and that really started up the movement, and that's how it got traction.
What was Silent Spring like mainly about?
So Silent Spring, as I said before, it talked about the harms of pesticide and insecticide, and how it would just cause more harm than good, and people should avoid using those kind of products on their plants and just stand up for a better place.
Okay. Do you have anything else?
Yeah. So going off of the radiation from the hydrogen bomb testing, there'd be CO2 emissions from cars that have just been produced from factories, and that would cause a global warming effect that would affect the air and lower the oxygen that would be produced from it that we need to breathe. So it kind of disrupted the cycle of the CO2-O2 movement between plants and humans. So in order to counteract these effects, later on there would be the introduction of electric cars, and this used no gasoline, nothing that would produce gas emissions from its tank, and that would help tremendously.
Additionally, this is kind of unrelated, but another big influence of the environmental movement was the creation of national parks, an attempt to preserve nature.
Right, and a way to get everyone together to stand up in these national parks, there would be the establishment of Earth Day in April 22nd, 1970. And on that first day, 20 million citizens gathered in communities across the country to express their support for a cleaner, healthier planet. And this also led to the creation of the Environmental Protection Agency by the Congress and Nixon, which would enforce environmental laws, conduct environmental research, and reduce human health and environmental risks from pollutants.
It's kind of ironic considering the Watergate scandal, but yeah.
Right, yeah.
So in a nutshell, would you say at the start we didn't really care too much for the environment, and people were more for making money, and not as much for the conservation of the environment? But as we started to become more of a wealthier country, we started to actually take notice of our environment?
Yeah, I think in the beginning we still were kind of affecting the environment, but we didn't really know it. And honestly, even if we did, I don't think anybody cared. But once it, the effects started really showing themselves later on, in later time periods, then that's when people were like, oh, well, maybe we should be paying attention and not harming the environment as much.
Yeah, as we became more of a civilized group with more laws implemented into the government system, I think it kind of enforced the idea that we need to take care of the environment instead of the free will that we had back then.
You want to say anything, Jack?
Yeah, basically, like what Joseph said, the Hudson River School helped to push that forward and just shows that the environment is something that is very powerful and needs to be taken care of.
Okay, so that was our podcast on environmentalism and APUSH, I guess. So I'm Carlo. That's Michael. That's Jack, and that is Joseph. And
Hello.
we are out.